Okay.
Hi, Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. To everyone watching, thank you so much. And I'm super excited to be here with Shelly, who is a former member of my Seeking Wholeness Trauma Group Coaching Program. And she's here to kind of share her experience, what the program has done for her. So, Shelly, thank you so much for agreeing to do this, or for volunteering, I should say.
Yes.
All right, Bismillah. So I think the big question that people would have when they watch any of these videos is, where were you before you started coaching?
So I was in a place where I actually had done trauma coaching before, and I was actually in counseling at the time, and either of those things really got me to the finish line, to say. Like, I feel like I was still struggling with a lot of things. So when I came across your group,
Yeah.
we actually had a one-on-one before I joined the group. It just felt like this might be the thing, and it actually, alhamdulillah, ended up being the thing that would help me bring closure to a lot of the obstacles and a lot of the hurdles I was still facing. And so I was at a place when I joined where I was hopeful, because I was doing things to try and overcome a lot of my traumas, but I was also stuck because they weren't working, or they hadn't fully worked in the past. Yeah, and so when I heard about your mind, body, soul approach, I'm like, this, I think, sounds like the right next step.
Yeah. So you're the first person who has ever done trauma coaching before working with me. So most
Yes.
people would have done therapy, and sometimes they're with a therapist who's trauma informed, sometimes they're not. And it would always be like, I've done the work, but I still feel stuck. That's the word. You use that word, and that's a word that I hear from a lot of clients. Like, I just feel stuck, and I know that I can't keep doing the same thing. Was your therapist or your counselor, your trauma coach Muslim?
She was, and she was wonderful, honestly. It was 2 years ago, and I think that's the thing with the journey of healing, right? She was 2 years ago, I was in a very different place in my life, and it was a very stressful time, and there was a lot of fear around that point in my life. And I feel like that's why the body piece of your program is so important, because until you find that safety, your brain is not going to let you see things. It doesn't let you go to those places. But your body still holds the trauma. So you still get triggered and you're like, what's going on? You don't really understand what's happening. So with her program, we did a lot of closing the loop. And so for closing the loop, a lot of times you have to know specific situations. And we would have conversations where it's like, okay, what are the top 5 triggers? What are those 5 things? And so we would go through specific instances. But as years have passed, and like, some of the fear around those things have dissipated, your brain allows you to see things. So what I couldn't see when I was with her 2 years ago, I was able to see during your program. And I think it has a lot to do with the body safety that we implemented during the course.
Yeah. Oh my God. So important. And this is like something I feel like I die by. Like, one of the most important pieces that I'm passionate about in my approach is that before we even get to the subconscious healing, which is what everyone wants to focus on. Like, when we think healing, we think like, I want to be able to know that it's all up here. Like, I want to not be ruled by these thoughts or these traumatic memories. But we don't do that. We start off with your nervous system and your body, and because your body will tell you things that your mind doesn't even know how to explain. And that's just the incredible nature of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. It's instinctual. It's literally imprinted into our DNA. But it's so overlooked because we come to the idea of healing from a lot of like very westernized perspectives, and the Western approach to mental health and trauma is very top down. So like, tell me what's going on up here. And then that rids so much of what's really going on deep down in terms of your nervous system being so dysregulated that you might not be ready to think about those things. And so that's a huge thing that a lot of women say, which is they appreciated that they didn't have to discuss their trauma, or they didn't have to come in with this very clear idea of, this is exactly how my trauma affected me or what I'm suffering with. They discovered it later on because their body told them.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Do you mind sharing about what was the core piece that brought you? Like, what was the main life challenge? In as little detail as you want, that brought you here, because I think a lot of women are going to relate to this.
Oh my God, I feel like there's so many things.
Mhm,
But I am newly divorced. It
mhm,
was a few months after my divorce.
mhm,
And so we were deep into co-parenting and mental
mhm,
health issues, and the child involved is adjusting. So
mhm.
it was a whirlwind, I think, of a time in my life.
Exactly. Yeah. SubhanAllah. So it's, there has been such a huge, like a large number of women who also are going through divorce who have come through the program. And I love that we're able to create that like sense of safety where it's not just about healing from the previous marriage and like the experiences in that, but also for those who want to remarry, building healing and then releasing trauma associated with that, and then building the skills to be able to build a healthy marriage in the future. So
Yeah.
I want, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and not even just a marriage in the future, because who knows what Allah has in
Exactly.
store, but also just the fact that you have to now co-parent, right? When there's
Mhm.
children involved, it's not like it's a clean break. I never have to see you again. Alhamdulillah, we're not at that place. We do try and co-parent as
Yeah.
peacefully as possible. Um, but yeah, there's no such thing as like I'm never gonna have to deal with this again. So the healthier you can be, um, I feel like you can stay calmer, you can have more rational conversations. And even if that's just one sided, right? If it's
Mhm.
just me
Mhm.
being really regulated, then that's going to
Mhm.
help things from escalating.
Oh my God, so important. Even in like, I mean, I've had conversation with women who they were divorced and they don't have children, so they're not co-parenting, but still in the post divorce phase where maybe you're like dividing assets, or they're just things, it's loose ends that have to be tied up, and the overwhelming stress of having to deal with that and not knowing how to regulate your own nervous system when the other person is so dysregulated, it'll drive you mad. It'll
Yep.
cause so much anxiety. And so this is why, like, subhanAllah, the work that is done um, in the trauma group coaching program goes well beyond just resolving trauma. It's also creating this nervous system resilience to be able to truly, like, in some cases just make your way through, and in other cases thrive in situations that you're going to have to deal with just as a consequence of hardship in life, because that's what
Yeah.
Allah tells us. Yeah. Tell me what happened going through the program. What changed? What made you like go like, what in the world? I didn't know this was possible. And then where are you after the program?
Oh, okay. The program honestly benefited me in so many ways. Like it's kind of hard to answer that question. I could
Uh,
say so many things. Um, but I think just being aware that you can be calm, you can stay regulated no
mm,
matter what comes at you, has helped me dramatically
mm,
with many relationships, actually,
mm,
because I think there was a sense of ownership before.
mm,
Because when you are dealing with so many things that are out of balance, you try and control everything,
mm,
and really you can control nothing. And so that leads to a lot of anxieties. And so now when you do find a place of calmness, it's almost like, well, that's, I don't have to control that. That I just have to control me and my reactions. And then you can change the focus of where you put your energy, right?
mm,
Like, I don't have to change that person. I don't have to, they don't actually even have to understand my position. I just
mm,
have to be okay with my position, and put my energy on me and how do I handle myself and show up in that moment.
mm.
So I think that's the biggest change, and I've found a lot of joy from that because it's a lot. It's very freeing to not feel like you have to control everyone and control outcomes and things like that, right? Because you can't. One, you can't. But when you feel centered and you feel safe in your side of yourself, then
Mm.
you kind of you're able to let go of that control. You're like, it's okay, whatever comes, I can handle it. Alhamdulillah. So I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest shift.
Oh my God, I love that. What's so annoying for me is like there's so language we understand and we share. And so I know when you say calm, I know exactly what you mean. But
Yeah.
I know audience members are not, they're gonna think, oh, like calm, like chill, like it's fine. And It's like, no, calm it.
No.
Our nervous system is no longer reactive because we
Yes.
do so much work on really essentially teaching the nervous system how to stop immediately going into fight or flight or whatever your trauma response is, and coming from this place of like centeredness and
Hmm.
alignment, and my nervous system can remain regulated. It's no longer right. And what you were discussing in terms of needing control everything, that's hypervigilance. When
Hmm.
you've experienced trauma, your brain automatically starts scanning for, and I know that I'm not explaining this to you, I'm explaining this to the
I
people.
know.
Your brain is automatically scanning for the dangers in constantly in your environment. And one very common trauma response with hypervigilance is, I just need to try to create as much consistency and control as I can, because maybe then I can create some predictability, but
Hmm.
it just burns you out. So instead of allowing us to go into that trauma response, we're teaching the nervous system to be like, hey, actually, let's expand your window of tolerance, teach the nervous system safety. And then when these things are feeling out of control, you're okay. And subhanAllah, what ends up happening is more things actually do start being in your control because you're no longer chasing it.
Hmm.
Like certain things do get easier. And you're like, oh my God, all I had to do was not not
Yeah.
do.
I had to do the opposite of what I was doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
subhanAllah. Yeah.
And I think it's an overall state of your nervous system obviously being more regulated, but then also in the program we learn all these tools. So if
Mm,
you do feel yourself escalating, then you can do, the heart hug, or you could do the double breath, or you could do all of these tools that you've given me,
mm.
um, that actually really help. And it was a skill set or a toolbox that I didn't have before. Like everybody says, okay, breathe deeply, but sometimes you need more than that. And
Yeah.
sometimes like the double breath breathing to me honestly was such a game changer that can regulate my nervous system in like seconds.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you've got, yeah, that's one of my favorites too.
Yeah.
It's I can do it in one breath. So that's
Yeah.
it. So people, right, and this is the thing, people will go through therapy, right? And they'll, and this is not knocking therapists. I flipping hate when therapists come on. They're like, well, wait, you're making people feel like they shouldn't go through mental health intervention. And it's like, no, people just want to find what's going to work for them because it's very vulnerable to be seeking that support. So it's
Hmm.
okay for them to know that not everything is going to be a good fit for them.
Yeah.
But, I'll have so many clients where it's like, yeah, my therapist taught me like this specific tool, but it's like we teach a system. So you have
Hmm.
your nervous system regulation tool. So when you are feeling dysregulated and you're like, oh my gosh, you can bring that safety back. But you also have your trauma integration tools to release trauma. So we're not constantly, you're not fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
Most therapists and most coaches are only focusing on nervous system regulation, which is ridiculous if you're working on trauma, because you can't psych the brain out of the fact that it's still holding on to that trauma and the body's still storing it, right?
Yeah.
The window of tolerance can only be expanded so much. And so that's why I love that. And you guys always, everyone has their preferences um, on what tools and what combination they do. And you
Yeah.
learn it like a science. That's my goal, is to teach this like a science, to the point that after the program, you should be able to put your hands up and be like, I got it. Like, you shouldn't need the program anymore. You'll
Yeah.
always have access to the resources and the videos and, to go back, but you'll have, be so well resourced in yourself to be able to handle those situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think we learn a lot of the science, which has helped
Mhm.
me a lot to be like,
Mhm.
that's why that happens. Okay.
Yeah. And in a way that is chewable.
Yes.
Um, because there are people there who are going to be science nerds and they love it and they can take all the detail. But then there are people who have no clue. And one of my proudest moments in the program was when I had a client who, she had said, I used to always try to do this work and I bought the books, like, all about, she's like, I opened the first few pages. I'm like, I have no freaking clue what they're saying. And I closed it and I felt, she was like, I felt so defeated. I'm like, what the heck?
Mm,
I can't even heal if I can't understand. It's like, I
yeah.
went through the program and you made it so easy to digest. It's like,
Yes.
perfect. That's the goal.
Yes. it's and it's actually, I'll tell you one quick story about how I've applied some of the science. So we do hypnotherapy in the program, and one, I was a little skeptical about hypnotherapy to start with,
Mhm.
but
I
then
now call it halal hypnotherapy because I
yeah,
always get
okay,
that question, and it's like, no, we do it in a way that is from a fiqh perspective completely fine and okay, and is based on science in the way that many other trauma integration techniques function. So
yes,
just plugging that.
yes. But then you try and get into this like sleep sort of state before we start
Mhm.
that work. And so I was finding through the program that I was waking up in the middle of the night with these thoughts. So I'm like, you know what? Let me try this hypnotherapy technique because
Uh,
I'm like, I'm kind of already in this sleepy state. And so I would work through whatever I had dreamt about.
mhm.
And then I would re-message because like you had taught
Yeah.
us, you have to replace the negative message with a
Mhm.
positive message. And so I found that I was doing that during the night and it actually was very successful.
100% because
Yeah.
so here's what people don't understand. Okay. So with hypnotherapy, before you even can get into the point where we're rewiring the memories, because that's what we're doing. Um, at least that's how I practice hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
You have to get into your trance state, which is this like state of both focus and relaxation in your brain has to be able to do it at once. Why is the type of hypnotherapy we're doing halal? It's because our brain does it while you're sleeping. That's what
Hmm.
it's trying to do. But what trauma does is because it stimulates the sympathetic nervous system and it kicks up your fight or flight. If you're sleeping and your brain is trying to process a traumatic memory, it wakes you up. And
Hmm.
so this is what part of actually why people with complex PTSD and just regular PTSD have such bad sleep disturbances. There's research on this. And so being able to do that, what you just did, that's literally self-hypnotizing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
But I wouldn't have thought of like I wouldn't have known to do the rewiring part without the program, right?
Mhm,
Like I didn't realize like I was just having all my sleep disrupted.
mhm,
But now I had tools to actually implement to make that a, you
yeah,
know, productive experience or a healing experience.
yeah, and to
Yeah.
support your brain in doing what it was supposed to do, but
Yes, what it was
couldn't do.
trying to do.
Exactly. Right. Talk a little more about. I would love to hear your insight on kind of like the Islamic approach as well. I think that's one thing. Oftentimes, people who are coming to me weren't working with someone Muslim, so this is what they find very refreshing.
Yeah, I think the difference because the trauma um, coach I was working with a few years ago, she was Muslim, and so we would greet each other "Assalamu alaikum" to start, of course. But there wasn't a lot of she was as a herself a practicing Muslim, but
Mhm,
there wasn't a lot of Islam put into the therapy itself. Like we didn't rely on the Quran or examples of our history or anything like that. And I think that was a really big change with this program that I found very
yeah.
valuable. Um, because I think it's helpful to know that you are doing um sorry, I'm just gonna hang up that phone. You're doing something that Allah would be pleased with, that you are trying
Mhm,
to take care of your body and you're trying to take care of your mind so you can be, as productive as you possibly can be. And I found a lot of strength in healing through dua. I found that I was really able to um, connect through making dua to Allah.
mhm.
Um,
And
and to
integrated
me, that was,
trauma
yeah,
through
it was a really healing processing tool for me.
mhm. Crazy. It's crazy. It's flipping insane when you think about it because my frustration, and this is why I'm so like almost like bear like when it comes to when you don't get, I don't think you guys get to see the side of me too much when I get like Muslim therapists who are coming at me, right? For the work
Mhm.
that I do, because it's almost like, no, stay in your lane. We're the therapists. We deal with this. And I'm like, well, clearly there's a gap there because
Mm.
people are trying therapy and then they're coming to this program. And obviously you ladies know you're not dumb. You know how to make decisions for yourself. You know how to make informed decisions. I try to be very transparent with the program before you even join so you know what to expect. But if we're saying that our deen is the guide to life and that the Quran is the book, the key to life, then how is it that we went so many, like, especially in our modern day, so many decades, not being able to integrate our understanding of the deen with what like trauma is. Like, how did nobody sit there and think, what is it that the Prophet ﷺ do
Hmm.
to heal trauma? And I was frustrated because when I first started, there was only one lecture on trauma from an Islamic perspective on YouTube. One. Insane. And it was just a lecture. It was just informative. It wasn't practical. And that was so frustrating to me because I'm like, how many people are suffering with this? We have one lecture, right? And
Hmm.
no tools. And so it's like, okay, we're going to build this because there's no there it's right there because and I'm sure you see it now too. When you learn the language, you know the research, you can come to it with that critical kind of trauma lens. And then you're reading the Quran and it's like, oh my God, how interesting. When Maryam alayha salam is in labor and she screams, oh my God, I wish I would have died before this, right? And you see that and you're like, wow, she must have been so dysregulated at that state because not people are like, oh, it's because of the labor pains. How many women have gone through labor and not screamed a statement like that as a woman of God? There's
Hmm.
also the fear of what's to come when she has a baby and she has to explain, I never did anything, right? This
Yeah.
is from God. And subhanAllah, and the idea of shake the tree, like do something with your body that seems impossible. Like when you look at these things through a trauma lens, it's so different.
Yeah.
And then you can apply these practically. They're no longer distant stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who's looking into the program, but they're hesitant to apply? They're like,
Mm.
I don't know if it's going to work. Maybe they've even tried like therapy or counseling. And it's like, oh, I tried and I'm starting to feel hopeless.
Um, I would say to take the leap of faith and try it. Because I mean, I can say for myself, but I can say for also my cohort of women who collectively all had such amazing improvements throughout our journey together. One, Hannah is incredibly knowledgeable on what she does. And I feel very blessed to have come across you and to have worked with you. But the program has made, I feel like I'm getting emotional.
It's a
But
girl. I cried on the last day of our cohort. I was like a sobbing mess. So
but I do feel the program has made a significant change in my life for the better. I feel like I can approach the day with space in my mind, which I don't. I think people who deal with trauma can understand that statement
yep.
because you're just so overwhelmed all the time by everything.
Yeah.
um, and after the program, I'm reading books, I'm doing courses, I'm a much better homeschooling mother. You just have space. You have space to live again.
You live
So I would
again.
say take the risk because the mind, body, soul approach um, is the bottom up approach. I think is incredibly successful. And if you haven't had success in other mediums, it's probably because you haven't done it in this way.
Mm,
So I would say it's definitely worth the investment. Um, and it's tools you can walk away with for life, right? So
mm,
it doesn't mean your every situation is going to be solved by the end of your time together, but it means you have the tools to continue your
exactly.
work, right? You have resources and you have a group of women that you can continue to stay in contact with. And we didn't talk about this, but having the group of women to do this course with was game changing. Like
Yeah.
to actually be with people who you can shake your head constantly because trauma is one of those things that it's very private. You don't
Mm,
you don't really talk about your deepest, you
yeah.
know, experiences with a lot of people. So to have these women to be like this happened and five of them be like, "Yep, I understand that." It is invaluable, really.
Yeah.
So I would say invest in yourself and inshallah it will work for you the way it worked for me.
Inshallah, I love that. And the most, it was a repeated statement I kept hearing was, I feel like I'm alive again, or I feel like I'm living
Mm.
again. And I was like, subhanallah. Yeah, it's a statement you don't understand if you
Yeah.
haven't experienced trauma. You don't know
Yeah.
it, you don't get it until you see it on the other side.
Yeah,
So
because you're functioning, right? You're getting through your days. You don't even
surviving.
know that there's something better.
Mm,
But then
mm,
when you get there, you're like, oh my God, this is what lightness feels like. This is what,
yeah,
it's a different state.
and may Allah allow everyone to be able to experience that lightness, when it comes to trauma and to sustain that for you guys. I know I mentioned this in the program. I say it in every cohort that I run. I'm not healing you, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who's healing you. And that's why we do it in a way that is going to be pleasing to him and based on the body he created. Right. So Jazakallah khair, Shelly, for sharing. And I hope that whoever is interested or, hearing this and feeling inspired, the link is in the description below to apply for the next cohort of the Trauma Group Coaching Program. And questions that you have can be answered there as well. Awesome. I'm going to stop the recording now.